It's an honor to speak with you.
Good to speak with you.
You're my first interview on our whirlwind tour of the Capitol building.
Great.
My goal here is, I don't really have too much of an agenda. Andrew and I sat down about 6 months ago, and he chastised me for not learning more about the political world, about your world. I'm a geek from Silicon Valley, and I've been all over the world covering, technology.
Right.
But never have been in the halls of where things really happen.
Well, I think things really happen in Silicon Valley. I'm not sure they really happen here.
So what is the agenda from your point of view, the tech agenda? Do you think about tech at all, or how
sure.
tech is...
Tech is how we get our freedom back, because tech is what's going to give us transparency on our government.
Explain more what you mean by that, and what you're hoping to see happen.
The technology revolution has given us an opportunity to recreate what our founders intended, which is a totally transparent federal government where the people who are the subject of that government can see what that government's doing. And so whether it's the Transparency and Accountability Act, whether it's online with several different agencies who have to report to Congress on a monthly basis online about what they're doing, how they're doing it, the metrics associated with that, how we measure performance. The federal government is 50 years behind the rest of this country in terms of management, in terms of measurement of performance, in terms of management based on that measurement of performance, and even putting metrics on something so you can see whether it's working.
Yeah.
The motivations are pure, but the management skills are like out of the 50s.
Yeah. We're seeing some movement here. I mean, we just got a tour of the Senate floor, and we're looking at the press gallery. And they didn't allow us to use cell phone cameras there, right? No cameras. So where I'm, in my world, I'm allowed, in fact, we're filming this live on Quick right now.
Yeah. Isn't it interesting that the press, who are the developers and purveyors of information to Congress, don't want you to see them live?
Yeah.
And what they do. Where's the transparency with that?
Yeah. But we are seeing some of the, I've been visiting some of the staffs this morning, and I saw somebody typing into WordPress doing a blog. Yeah. Are you doing that kind of thing? Are you?
Do I do a blog? No, no. I have a website. What I do is try to communicate with bloggers because it's a great way to get your message out, and it gets out there.
Why is that? What about bloggers are different than the normal press?
Because most of the time they don't have a bias, a built-in bias.
I think that's sort of funny.
A great example of that is
you don't read the same blogs I do.
Well, maybe not. In the 109th Congress, we had 49 hearings on waste in the federal government, and all the reporters up here, they weren't interested in it. Well, the public isn't interested in waste, spending your money. So there's this bias that's not sexy, that won't sell. But when you go online and people find out that we paid $5 billion out of the Pentagon for performance contractors to contractors who didn't meet their performance criteria, most Americans are interested in that. They want to know why their $5 billion got wasted. Or that we have a total of $300 billion in waste every year in the federal government, and what are the components of that? Most people out there who are outside of the confines of Washington are interested in that because it has a direct impact on whether they can afford to buy gas today, what their taxes are going to be on their kids in the future, whether Social Security is going to be viable, whether Medicare is going to be viable. Those are important things to people outside of Washington. They're not necessarily important to the media in Washington.
Interesting. I almost had the same problem in the tech world where the sexy stories, gets lots of hits, and the story that they should be reading or caring about, is harder to tell or not as sexy. A science story, for instance, is not as easy to, sit down for 10 seconds and read through it and get excited and link to it and talk about it. It doesn't cause that conversation often.
Well, that's because oftentimes they don't put the conclusion at the first.
Yeah.
And if you put the conclusion and what it had, the power that it has in terms of meaning to people's lives and changing people's lives, to hook them, then they'll read. You know, how long do people stay on blogs?
Yeah.
Until they get bored or they see something really interesting or they go to something else. You know, we all, when we search our favorite blogs, if we don't see something there, we're gone. So you got to hook early. You know, the attention span of bloggers is pretty short.
Yep, absolutely. That covers pushing messages out. How are you guys using technology to listen to your constituents?
Well, almost
thing.
all of our constituency input now is through the internet. I'd say probably 3/4 of everything we hear from Oklahomans comes via email or through blogs out there that we pick up and monitor, our staff monitors in terms of what's going on there.
Yeah.
So, you know, it's made it a ton easier to be able to email your congressman rather than write down, type a letter, print it out, mail it here, has to go through the security. By the time we get it, it's 3 weeks after it was mailed. Then it's got to be open, answered, and say, what's your input? And then we have to figure out what's Senator Coburn's answer to this.
Yeah. You're a medical doctor.
I
You're
am.
one of the only medical doctors on the Senate.
There's 2 in the Senate. I'm the only one that continues to practice.
Yeah. How do you think, because I was on John Edwards' plane when he was announcing that he was running for president, and I listened to him speak, and I listened to how audiences were responding to him. And when healthcare came up, there was a lot of applause. How do you think that's going to, the pressure to turn healthcare into a public thing? What do you think about that?
Well, that's the easy way to do it, but on the downside of the easy is the way we're going to control the costs if we have the government do it is we're going to ration care, just like every other society does that has a government-run care. The question I would hope people were asked is, are we spending enough money in healthcare? And the answer to that is yes, we're spending $2.3 trillion. Is that money really going to help people get well and prevent them from coming sick? And the answer to that is no. So how do we change that? Do we change that with a Soviet-style bureaucracy that has the efficiency of the post office and the carrying of Katrina? Or do we do it with forces that we use in every other aspect of our society, which is markets that said great players are going to get rewarded, players with innovation, quality, great outcomes are going to get rewarded, those with less outcomes, poorer outcomes, poor service are not going to get rewarded. And when you put competitive forces to play in the healthcare field, we're all going to save money by about 1/3, and we're going to markedly improve the quality and the outcomes.
The reason I asked that question had to do with something else, which is our innovation engine that happens in Silicon Valley and Austin, Texas, and other places that have a lot of R&D dollars being spent. Those jobs are pretty expensive jobs, $100,000 to $300,000 jobs, and everyone that moves overseas is a lot of value that goes overseas. And the CEOs that talk to me are worried about the cost of healthcare, the cost of gas, the ability to keep workers here after they get out of college and stuff. What do you think about innovation and how to encourage the R&D industry to make sure that they stay here rather than go somewhere else?
Well, I think there's a couple of things. One is to create a corporate tax system that is not the second highest in the world. That's number one. Number two is make permanent the R&D tax credit. Number three is emphasize and reward higher level education. Make it rewarding. Number four is don't do anything to damage the tech that we have now. 80% of all the innovations in healthcare in the world come out of this country. You go to a government-run system, that isn't going to happen. Because the incentive for that to be there will be gone. So there are a lot of answers to it, but if we trust what has worked well for us, whether in any technology, whether it be computer chip technology, whether it be new electronics, whether it be any other aspect of our society, the way we've allocated that and the way it's come into fruition is through a marketplace. And what we've done at the government level is diminish market forces. And one of the reasons that we're seeing healthcare inflation is not because costs are rising, but because the intermix of government in a marketplace has made it tremendously inefficient.
Yeah. A lot of geeks and a lot of CEOs, CTOs listened to me, and some of the questions was, where's the technology leadership in the government? You know, either in the executive branch or in your branch.
Well, there really shouldn't be leadership. What there should be is leadership to get out of the way. And that's the problem. A great example, the Small Business Administration. One of their charges is to decrease the cost of government on small business, because Right now, it's over $6,000 per employee, per small businessman, that the cost of the government impacts them. And that's not taxes.
Yeah.
That's regulation. Well, if you cut that by 2/3, what would happen? That'd be $4,000 per employee that could go into R&D, $4,000 that could go into a new investment, $4,000 to expand a business that's moving. You know, all those things, and yet we're inefficient. And when you look at the SBA, it goes back to what I was talking earlier. They have no metrics. The only way they measure metrics is how much money they loan, not whether or not they created long-term jobs, whether they created better capital formation, whether the capital was used more efficiently. In other words, that's why I say, go back, we have a 50s style government in a modern tech age, and we need to have the government catch up.
How do you make that happen?
Well, I think transparency is the first thing.
Okay.
You have to raise the level of disgust, and we're seeing it. A poll out this week, 11% of the American people have confidence in Congress. That is richly deserved, because we are clueless as a body as to the decisions everybody's making every day, because we're in the dark ages. And what we have to do is bring that up. The Transparency and Accountability Act, which was passed and signed in 2006, puts all of what government does online, so everybody can see it. That's going to bring the pressure of the American public to say, change it.
Interesting. What else would you like to say to the tech industry?
Just keep doing what you're doing.
Yeah.
Make it easier for us to be better, more efficient, and more transparent.
Okay. Well, thank you very much.
You're welcome. Great to visit with you.